Opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
2-1-0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger. Go for deploy.
Thanks, Karen, and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew must go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, September 3rd, and we are live in Mission Control Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm NASA's Leah Cheshire, and this morning the journey of Crew-6 continues as the team of 4 prepares to return home after 186 days in orbit and 184 of those days aboard the orbiting laboratory. We are in a tracking data and relay satellite system handover at this time, so we expect to regain views from the station and Dragon shortly. But right now, you've got a view inside Mission Control Houston. Flight director this morning is Pooja Jasrani. To her right is Capcom, who speaks with the crew aboard the station, David Brenna. Flight controllers in the room are all monitoring the systems for space station and have pulled go for hatch closure and continue to be go for undocking. The crew on board have been preparing for departure by loading cargo and research into Dragon, getting their suits prepared, and trading out their sleep stations with the newest arrivals, members of the Crew-7 mission who arrived just a week ago today. We're expecting hatch close to happen approximately 4:20 a.m. Central Time, so the crew is getting in some final farewells with their friends on the space station that they won't see again until they return to Earth. Our crew members coming home today include NASA astronauts Steve Bowen and Woody Hoburg, commander and pilot of Dragon, respectively, along with United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyayev, both mission specialists. It marks the first flight for all of those crew members except Bowen, who now has 227 days in total in space across his 4 flights by the time the team splashes down tomorrow. This crew arrived at the orbiting laboratory on March 3rd after launching from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida and are scheduled to splash down off the coast of Florida shortly after midnight, Monday, September 4th. Over the past several days, teams in Houston as well as SpaceX recovery teams have been monitoring the weather at the potential splashdown locations. Again, we have options in the Gulf Coast as well as along the Atlantic side of Florida. Teams have continued to poll go after several looks at those weather reports. And this look here in both mission control rooms. On the left, again, Mission Control Houston at Johnson Space Center in Texas, and on the right, the Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. That's the SpaceX Mission Control. Those teams are monitoring all of the systems aboard Dragon. They have also polled go for hatch closure and undock.
Hey, David. Good to be with you. We had a headlamp stowed near Location 8 in Dragon just for our long-term config, and we were wondering if that remains on Dragon or goes back to station.
We're checking. Give us a second, Woody.
Right, great. That was the one stowed with the APAS hatch tool for those ops.
Okay, Woody. Thanks. We copy. We're looking into it, and good to be talking to you today.
Again, that voice speaking with pilot of Dragon, David Brenna, is here in Mission Control Houston. He's the Capcom, or the capsule communicator. Brenna, however, is speaking with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station. So once the crew is fully boarded and hatches are closed, they will transfer over their communications to the core, the Crew Operations and Resources Engineer in Hawthorne, California, which you can see on the right of your screen. And right now, the International Space Station itself flying 268 statute miles south of Australia.
We figured out the answer. We found a satchel missing a headlamp, and it looks like a Dragon-style headlamp. So we've stowed it back on Dragon.
Okay, Woody, we copy and concur. Thanks.
Coming up shortly, we expect to hear the teams here in Mission Control.
This is Houston on 2. Stand by for Big Loop audio config.
And we have a look at the inside of Dragon this morning. This coming from over the shoulder of Commander Steve Bowen and pilot Woody Hoberg, looking at the crew displays inside the Dragon spacecraft. Dragon is an autonomous spacecraft and can fly on its own, and these crew members will be able to monitor its flight and can take control of the spacecraft if needed. As you can see, both are already in their suits. Visors are up. Once we prepare for undocking, those visors will be lowered. Gloves will be put on. They will be fully suited in all phases of dynamic flight. We're tracking an approximately 17-hour transit to splashdown today. And during that ride, after the crew members have exited the approach ellipsoid, or an invisible boundary around Dragon, they'll be able to take off their suits, get into something a little more comfortable, and enjoy the ride home and their last day in space. Also flew on Crew-6 as well as the Axiom Mission 1 astronauts, a private astronaut mission. It's currently 9:16 a.m. on the International Space Station, which uses Greenwich Mean Time. Team members are enjoying mostly a day off. However, we do have NASA astronaut Frank Rubio aboard. He is monitoring the suit-up process as well as hatch closure and eventually Dragon departure today. Other astronauts and cosmonauts are getting in their exercise.
Bio is configured at 0916 Zulu.
Copy, Dragon 0916 Zulu. Thank you.
Again, we are sending home 4 crew members today, the Crew-6 mission. The mission was commanded by NASA astronaut Steve Bowen. He's joined by Woody Hoberg, also a NASA astronaut, serving as the Crew-6 pilot. To Hoberg's left is Sultan Al-Nayati, that's the Crew-6 mission specialist, as well as Andrei Fedyaev, Roscosmos cosmonaut, another Crew-6 mission specialist. And this crew launched on March 2nd, earlier this year, arriving at the orbiting laboratory on March 3rd. They are wrapping up their mission today, scheduled for undocking at approximately 6:05 a.m. Central Time. Currently, we're standing by for hatch closure aboard Dragon. And this view of Frank Rubio, NASA astronaut, as he continues to work on helping close the hatch aboard Dragon, as well as aboard the International Space Station side. Before undocking, they will need to pressurize the vestibule, that's the space between those two hatches, bring it down to a vacuum before we send Dragon home. Rubio is scheduled to return back to Earth this month, September. He will come home with a new spaceflight record, longest time in space for an American at 371 days.
SpaceX Endeavour, the Dragon hatch is closed.
Endeavour, we copy. Hatch is closed. Our commanding is in work now.
And Houston copies, hatch closed.
Confirmation from our crew members aboard Endeavour. The Dragon hatch itself is closed, that coming at 4:19 a.m. Central Time. Again, this is one of 2 hatches we need to see closed, the second being on the space station side. In the background of this shot, you can see our other 2 crew members, Sultan Al-Nayati and Andrei Fedyaev, still not in their suits. They will begin to get in their suits shortly. They continue to configure the spacecraft cabin as required ahead of undocking. Again, targeting undocking at 6:05 a.m. Central. A good look at the helmet and the suits for these astronauts. These suits were designed by SpaceX, and they are custom fitted for each crew member. Ahead of undocking, the crew members will also go through leak checks on their suit, ensuring that they have a proper seal. They're also able to receive communications as well as cool air through these suits, keeping them comfortable throughout the ride home.
Houston Station and 2 for Dragon departure.
With you on 2, go ahead.
David, Dragon departure A-Pass photos are downlinked via SSC12.
Okay, we copy SSC12.
As you can see, all 4 crew members continue to get suited up. And again, that Dragon hatch closed at 4:19 a.m. Central. Teams remain go for undock. Of course, as we mentioned, this has been over the course of weather briefings over the last few days, looking at potential splashdown locations off the coast of Florida, making sure that everything is safe for the crew members as well as the recovery teams to go pick them up once they splash down on one of the SpaceX recovery vessels. Dragon Endeavour, which is bringing the Crew-6 team home today, was at first docked to the Harmony Zenith or space-facing port of the Node 2 module. However, right now they are docked to the Harmony forward port, the forwardmost port on the International Space Station. They initially docked to that space-facing port on March 3rd when they arrived and conducted a port relocation maneuver from the Zenith to the forward port to allow SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft bringing cargo earlier this year to dock to that space-facing port. That Dragon cargo mission brought with it 2 International Space Station rollout solar arrays, also known as IROSAs, and the Zenith or space-facing port made it easier for the Canadarm2 to reach in, grab those solar arrays, and prepare them for a spacewalk. Bowen, Hoberg, and Alniati worked across several spacewalks to prepare the space station for those arrays and install them.
With you on 2, go ahead.
Right, the seals look good, everything is ready, and we're looking for a go in 5.3 to close the A-Pass hatch.
And you have a go.
Copy, thanks.
Teams in Mission Control Houston have given NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, who is on the station side, the go to close the A-pass hatch. This creates that vestibule, that space between the Dragon hatch and the station side. And once closed, we will begin the depressurization process of that area.
Houston, station on 2. A-pass hatch and A-pass equalization valve are closed, and we are ready for Dragon IDA vestibule depress.
Houston copies.
Again, that voice on the space station side being NASA astronaut Frank Rubio, confirming that the A-pass hatch on the space station is closed and they are preparing for depressurization of the vestibule. Everything moving right on the timeline this morning. As the 4 crew members of Crew-6 continue to get suited up, confirmation again that the Dragon hatch closed at 4:19 a.m. Central Time. The A-pass hatch on the space station side was just closed at 4:28 a.m. Central. Our crew members on Crew-6, NASA astronauts Steve Bowen, Woody Hoberg, United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyayev preparing to return home after 184 days aboard the orbiting laboratory. We are going to wrap up our coverage of the hatch closure for now. However, this is just the beginning of today's operations. We'll be back live in an hour and 15 minutes.
Dragon, we had successful intercom checks. That's 5.2 and 4.010.
And Dragon, this is SpaceX. We copy good intercom. And just for your awareness, we have configured the hex for maximum cooling, and you can control cabin air temperature via 4.080.
Please, we appreciate the reminder.
Again, things continue to be right on the timeline as the crew steps through their checks with teams on the ground this morning. We will resume coverage of undocking for Dragon at 5:45 a.m. Central Time, 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be looking for physical separation of Dragon from the space station at 6:05 a.m. Central Time. So please come back and join us as we save.
Step 7.4.
We're with you on 2.
David, looking for a go on step 7.4.
Hey, you are go.
Next.
Again, we will be back at 5:45 a.m. Central Time as Crew-6 begins their journey back to Earth, scheduled undocking for 6:05 a.m. Central Time. For now, this is Mission Control Houston.
It's a new era of pioneers, star sailors, thinkers, and adventurers.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
Let's go.
We have been given the scientific knowledge, the technical ability, and the material to pursue the exploration of the universe.
There is orange soil. Well, don't move it till I see it. Hey, it is! I can see it from here. It's orange. Wait a minute, let me put my visor up. It's still orange. Sure it is. Crazy. Orange. I've got to dig a trench, Houston.
Across the nation are sacred sites that capture the spirit of America's character. And one of those places is right here, the Kennedy Space Center.
Every single vehicle that has carried humans beyond the bounds of low Earth orbit has undergone integration and testing in that vehicle assembly building, crawled down this roadway and launched right here from the Kennedy Space Center. The Space Launch System, mated with the Orion spacecraft, will continue this proud tradition.
As soon as we roll out of the vehicle assembly building, High Bay 3, and the world gets a chance to see this rocket, I think it is going to be shocking.
On March 17th, NASA took a giant step toward returning humanity to the moon. The fully assembled Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft for the Artemis 1 mission made its debut outside the massive vehicle assembly building.
We've seen the mobile launcher outside, and it's massive, but now add an over 300-foot rocket on top of it, it's just going to be amazing.
Charlie Blackwell Thompson oversees the launch countdown, ultimately providing the go for launch.
Entity, launch director, representing this team and all the men and women that have worked to make this day happen, I proudly give you a go to roll the Artemis launch vehicle to the pad.
Ladies and gentlemen, the world's most powerful rocket right here.
Once outside, the rocket began its nearly 4-mile journey to the pad, riding atop a 6.6 million-pound crawler transporter, which was originally constructed to transport the Apollo moon rocket.
In 1 year, we have completely stacked the vehicle. We completed most of our testing, all very successful, and we are so close to launch, and the excitement is just crazy.
Now NASA's new moon rocket is making the same journey the Saturn V took 50 years ago.
And just as all eyes are on the SLS tonight as it makes its journey, in a few short weeks, all eyes are going to be on the sky as it rocks the space coast and takes its maiden flight around the moon.
It is amazing to see the culmination of all of this work of many years from many industries and many people that have come and go to have a chance to then now see their work going over to the pad and then launching to go to the moon.
The rocket is rolling to historic Launch Complex 39B. It's launch pad used for both Apollo and shuttle launches, sending hundreds of astronauts to space throughout the decades, and now on tap to send hundreds more as we return to the moon and venture beyond to Mars. But for this mission, there will be no astronauts on board. Before the uncrewed Artemis 1 stack can launch to our nearest celestial body, it has to travel to the pad for a wet dress rehearsal, a test to run the rocket capsule, launch team, and launch pad through their paces, simulating a launch countdown.
When we get to the pad team will be connecting all the interfaces between the pad and the mobile launcher so that we can go ahead and start our operations at the pad. So at that point, the launch director really takes over and she will go down the sequence as if it was really a normal launch day.
Wet dress rehearsal is essentially launch without a launch. It is really the reason we're doing it is to verify and validate all of the pieces that go into launch countdown. So wet dress is really our opportunity to find any issues or adjustments that we need to make in our launch countdown.
For Artemis 1, the wet dress rehearsal is the final and most critical test before the rocket can return to the launch pad for liftoff to the moon. During the countdown, over 730,000 gallons of supercooled liquid propellants will be loaded into the rocket as part of the nearly 2-day launch countdown.
We will configure all of the ground systems exactly the way we would for launch, and we will fully load the core stage and the interim cryopropulsion stage with their liquid fuels. That'll be the first time that that's been done from here at Kennedy Space Center. There have been pieces of these things done in multiple different areas. We've tested all of these systems in multiple different locations, but this will be the first time where we pull it all together into all of it, all in the same progression that we've got laid out for launch countdown.
Wet dress is the biggest milestone we have aside from launch, because that means that the rocket is now put together, has been tested separately and together, and it is ready to go and be filled with fuel to simulate how we're going to do it at the pad, and then it tells us the rocket is ready to go for launch.
And behind that wet dress rehearsal is a launch team made up of hundreds of engineers monitoring each system of the 320-foot-tall Artemis 1 rocket and capsule. Sitting in firing room 1 is the core launch control team, monitoring hundreds of launch commit criteria to ensure the ground systems and flight hardware are ready for launch.
Now you would think that launch control team in Firing Room 1 is it, that's all you need. We have an expansive support team across really the entire NASA enterprise that is supporting us on launch day.
And that support spans the entire nation, from additional systems engineers sitting in Kennedy's Firing Room 2, to the flight control team at Johnson Space Center in Houston, to the contractors responsible for designing and building each segment of the rocket and capsule.
This team is really shaping up to be a great, very skilled and ready to operate and execute launch for Artemis 1.
With the Artemis 1 launch team now fully certified and the wet dress rehearsal complete, SLS and Orion are ready for their final pit stop, returning to the VAB before venturing back to Launch Pad 39B for liftoff.
I mean, we are going, and we're going together, and we're having an opportunity to do this in a new generation of space exploration in which I can say that I'm honorably a part of.
You know, you come every day to the VAB and you see the rocket and you can't believe what we have accomplished.
People throughout history have always explored, and you never know what you're going to learn.
Exploration is not always about the destination, but it's the path that you travel, the things you learn along the way.
And the things we're going to learn are going to be incredible. We can't even begin to understand what those are today.
Our workforce has been a relentless spirit. We imagine, we build, we never stop pushing the envelope of what is possible.
NASA is preparing for a journey back to the moon, and after that, we're setting our sights on Mars. To get there, we need tons of rocket power coming from our Space Launch System.
When it comes to how much power this thing can push out, this thing is massive.
It's going to be mesmerizing to stand next to this massive vehicle. The immensity of it, knowing that this thing is going to be propelling a rocket into space and around the moon.
Hang on, it's probably best to start back at the beginning. It all started in Promontory, Utah, where Northrop Grumman manufactured each of the segments that make up the rocket's boosters. After a 10-day cross-country journey, the booster segments were delivered to Kennedy Space Center's Rotation, Processing, and Surge Facility, or RPSF. If this all sounds familiar, that's because it's the same facility that was used to process shuttle booster segments, which all came from Utah. Then they're ready to go to the iconic Vehicle Assembly Building, or VAB, where the rest of the motor segments are assembled and stacked on top of the mobile launcher.
So the one thing about this vehicle, of course, it's produced all across the country. Components all come here. They may be built around the country, but they all come together right here in the Vehicle Assembly Building.
Our SLS rocket will generate 8.8 million pounds of thrust to break through Earth's gravitational pull. That's more power than the Space Shuttle and the Saturn V rocket used. Teams with NASA's Exploration Ground Systems are responsible for assembling the boosters that will house the majority of that power. The twin solid rocket boosters, made up of 10 total motor segments, will stand nearly 17 stories when fully stacked. First, teams will inspect and prep the hardware. Next, they're ready to start stacking the segments, a process that takes time, patience, and a steady hand.
Once we have everything done in High Bay 4, we pick up the segment with the 325 crane, pick it up over the 16th floor crossover to where you see it now, and we begin stacking the segments. Each segment, we lift over the 16th floor crossover and stack it. Once we stack it, we put it on top of the segment below, and we put about 177 pins all the way around the whole thing to attach each segment.
And the pressure to perform the operation flawlessly can test the team's nerves.
There's a tremendous responsibility involved with processing flight hardware like this. It's nerve-wracking at times, but it's exciting. There's zero appetite for risk in a program like this.
We have a bunch of shuttle guys that are here to show us along the way. You know, if we get stuck, they're there to guide us. At the beginning of the stacking, it was very nerve-wracking. You know, with each segment that we stacked, a little bit of the nerve comes off. By the third or fourth one, it's easy peasy. You know, we're pushing through, all the jitters are gone, and we're just excited to get finished with it.
With all 10 booster segments now fully stacked on the mobile launcher, there's just one final piece of the puzzle to round out the power needed to get SLS off the ground and send it to space. Core stage. After a 900-mile journey aboard NASA's Pegasus barge, the SLS core stage, the largest rocket stage NASA has ever built, has made it to Kennedy Space Center.
Today is a huge day. This is the last piece of big hardware that we need for Artemis 1 processing. And we've just been waiting a long time for this part of the vehicle to arrive so that we can get going on the next steps of our stacking operations.
Standing an impressive 212 feet tall and weighing a whopping 188,000 pounds, the core stage came all the way from Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. The core stage went through round after round of rigorous testing, including what's called its Green Run series, truly putting its performance to the test. The series involved 8 rounds that looked at systems individually before culminating in pure power. With over 700,000 gallons of propellant flowing through the core stage and its RS-25 engines firing for 8 minutes straight, the successful final test resulted in some big emotions from the team.
We cried, we laughed, and we cheered because it was so emotional to see, the years of culmination coming through.
And that victory did not come without overcoming a few challenges, proving why at NASA we test as frequently and as hard as we do.
And we got to shut down. All personnel.
So we actually did a 1-minute test on the first hot fire test, and then we learned a lot from that. We understood the vehicle more, we made a few changes, and then we got back into our second hot fire test.
There was a lot of joy and workmanship and ownership of being able to work that process and be able to get it done. When we went for the second hot fire and we went for the 500 seconds, that was just pure exhilaration.
Following its arrival at Kennedy, teams moved the core stage into the VAB, where it was lifted by a crane and placed in between the twin solid rocket boosters. Serving as the backbone of the rocket, the core stage will provide more than 2 million pounds of thrust to help send the Orion spacecraft on its trip around the moon.
Essentially, we have these two massive cranes that are located inside of the VAB, where we go ahead and we pick 2 points at the end of the core stage, one on the back portion of it and on the front portion of it. We lift it up to the point where we're able to transition it from a horizontal position over into a vertical position, and then essentially bring it way up to the top of the vehicle assembly building and cross it over into High Bay 3, in which we ensure that we don't damage any part of the vehicle as it's incoming into its position.
NASA's largest rocket stage, now fully integrated with the twin boosters, is ready to get Orion off the Earth. But it will take one more critical component to give the capsule that extra push it needs to journey tens of thousands of miles beyond the moon. With just a single RL-10 engine, the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, or ICPS, will provide over 20,000 pounds of thrust to send Orion on the ride of a lifetime. To connect the ICPS with the rocket stack, teams next added the launch vehicle stage adapter to the core stage, followed by the ICPS.
The ICPS is the Interim Cryogenic Propulsion Stage, and essentially it's somewhat of the upper stage of the entire SLS vehicle. And what that will do is propel the Orion capsule along with its service module over to its destination, which at this point in time will be the moon.
But before the spacecraft can be attached to the rocket, teams will conduct a series of tests to ensure all of SLS's components communicate properly with one another, plus the ground systems equipment, the launch control systems, and its software. Adding to the challenge, those methods for testing have changed significantly since the days of the Apollo program. Initially built in the 1960s to house assembly of the Saturn V, the VAB has undergone some major modifications to support several different kinds of rockets and spacecraft, whether they're going into low Earth orbit or venturing to deep space.
This high bay was shuttle heritage. Before that, it was Apollo heritage. So there's upgrades that are still occurring today to include upgrades that will support Artemis II and Artemis III.
When SLS blasts off from Kennedy's Launch Pad 39B, Orion isn't the only thing it will be sending to space. Hitching a ride with Orion are tiny shoebox-sized satellites called CubeSats that were loaded into the Orion stage adapter in Kennedy's Space Station Processing Facility. The extra room in the stage adapter provides a rare opportunity to send those CubeSats to deep space to conduct science and research of their own. And these CubeSats are on tap to study a range of topics, from the moon to asteroids to the effect of space radiation on living organisms. At this point, the stack is nearly complete. All that's missing is the spacecraft itself, which has been in the Launch Abort System facility, getting outfitted with one of the spacecraft's most crucial pieces.
The Launch Abort System is kind of that pointy solid rocket motor that's at the top of Orion, and it's there to protect the crew in the event of an emergency, so it's a very important system.
Fully integrated with its Launch Abort System, the Orion spacecraft slowly makes its way to the VAB in the overnight hours. Upon its arrival, teams carefully lift and lower it onto the Orion stage adapter. With this operation, stacking the most powerful rocket the world has ever seen is complete, And what a sight to behold.
We're trying to decide, what does exploration look like in the future when we retire shuttle? You know, what does our nation want to do? Where do we want to go? How do we want to explore? To see it go from those days of words and ideas in people's heads to the 3 programs we have today and the Artemis mission and all the hardware that's been produced in factories ranging from big aerospace companies to little mom and pop shops all over the country and the world, it's unbelievable, and I'm just really proud.
Before SLS and Orion can launch our nation into a new era of space exploration, a series of tests needs to take place inside the VAB, validating the rocket and spacecraft as an integrated system and paving the way for one final milestone: wet dress rehearsal. The 322-foot tall, fully integrated rocket will roll out to Launch Pad 39B for a full test, allowing the launch team to run through a full launch countdown, but stopping just short of firing the engines.
I think we're going to be so proud when it rolls out of the VAB. I will personally be probably crying a little bit because it's such a big event. We worked so hard to get us to the day of rolling out. I'm probably going to be bawling when we launch it. See it through my tears because it's just a culmination of so much work from everybody.
We owe the advancement of science and research and technology to what we're doing here. And this is a big opportunity for us as a nation to reclaim our spot at the forefront of human space flight and exploration.
Artemis is going to be a major part of history. It most definitely is going to rock the space industry when it flies. This program is going to go to the moon. It's going to go to Mars. We need that. This country needs that. This world needs that.
I'm so excited. It's going to be a lot of work ahead of us, but Artemis 1 is going to surprise everybody.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for awareness. We've transitioned into the elite check for the vestibule.
SpaceX Endeavour copies, and we see the same.
Dragon, Houston, on the Big Loop.
Houston Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, we're still about 45 minutes from undock, but before we get busy, we just want to say, wow, can you believe it's already time to leave? We can't. It's been an amazing mission. You've birthed 2 Cygnuses, or Cygni, docked 2 cargo Dragons, you've executed a port relocate, facilitated a private astronaut mission, performed 3 U.S. EVAs and 5 Russian EVAs, copious amounts of critical science, as well as your fair share of maintenance, stowage, and rack swaps. And we didn't really want to mention it, but you also mastered us in chess a few times, too. So you're truly space kings. You've done an incredible job, and to say it's been a pleasure to support you guys during this mission would be an understatement. Let's send you guys home.
Houston Endeavor, thank you very much. It's been a real privilege and an honor to be up here for this expedition as it continues. And we're coming up on 23 years of continuous occupation of the International Space Station, which is absolutely amazing. It's just a real privilege to be a part of it. It has been an amazing mission. The Expedition 69 crew has been above and beyond, and I've had the privilege of watching it all happen. I really think this has been amazing. And thank you, Houston, and thank you, Mission Control, and everybody on the ground, the entire team, from Scuba, Huntsville, Munich, Moscow, the entire team coming together and ensuring that our expedition was smooth and safely completed. It's really been an honor. Thank you. Houston Endeavor on the Big Loop, sail up to Crew-6 and Expedition 70, continue the winning streak of the ISS over the ground team.
You just had to add that, didn't you?
And Houston, I was patient. We debated whether I should say anything. But it was amazing to watch chess being played around the world. Really quite something to be a part of. Thank you very much for all of that.
We agree. Bring it on. And I know who to reach out to as a consultant if we need help here on the ground. station, Houston, on the big loop for Frank and tool setup. We just want to make sure that everything checked out okay.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, we had a successful vestibule leak check.
SpaceX Endeavour copies. Thank you.
has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up for scientific cooperation between countries.
2, 1, 0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, Roger. Go for deploy.
Thanks to you and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
You're looking at a live view of the Dragon Endeavour spacecraft as we await its departure from the International Space Station on its way back to planet Earth. It's Sunday, September 3rd, here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. We expect Dragon to push away from the space station at 4:05 a.m. Pacific, 7:05 a.m. Eastern, with our Crew-6 astronauts, including NASA's Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg, United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. The crew is currently suited up and in the Dragon, and the station hatches are sealed and in preparation for departure. Thanks for tuning in to watch live coverage of Dragon completing its 6th official long-duration mission for NASA's Commercial Crew program. For those of you following along, you'll know that the Crew-7 crew arrived just last week, and they will be taking over for Crew-6, who is now headed home. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. Joining me today from NASA Communications is Gary Jordan.
Hey.
Welcome.
Hey, Kate. Great to be here. Thanks. Once Dragon departs the station, the crew's flight home is expected to last around 17 hours. Shortly after separation, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, up to 5 departure burns, to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location.
Next on its trip home is deorbit, entry and landing, which covers all operations after the final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally, splashdown, all off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover Steve, Woody, Sultan, and Andre. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida at 12:26 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:26 p.m. Pacific Time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels.
Today on board the space station is Expedition 69 crew, led by Roscosmos cosmonaut and space station commander Sergei Prokopyev. Of course, just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. NASA astronaut Frank Rubio helped the crew members prepare for departure today and will be watching from the cupola, but the prime departure monitoring role falls on Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg from inside the Dragon. Mission controls in Houston and Hawthorne will back them up. Let's go over to Leah Cheshire at the NASA Johnson Space Center to talk a little bit about how the space station crew has been preparing to send the crew home and what we can expect from here until Dragon departs from the station. Leah.
Thanks, Gary, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The flight control team is primed and ready for this morning's undocking operations. Today's Orbit 1 team is being led by NASA Flight Director Pooja Jesrani, and the Capcom, the person speaking with the astronauts on the International Space Station, is David Brenna. Since Crew-7's arrival just last week, it's been a busy week during our direct handover. Over the last several days, the astronauts worked to pack Dragon full of cargo for the return journey. Along with the crew, Dragon will return cargo back to Earth, which includes some samples for continuing human research and some hardware and other items. Earlier today, Jasmine Mobelli and Andy Mogensen worked to move cold bags and polar freezers, which store cold research samples and scientific experiments, in Dragon Endeavour. All of this cargo is offloaded after we get the crew out following splashdown, and those scientific samples will be sent to researchers for final analysis, some of those samples being received by those researchers even within just a few hours after splashdown. The crew also took time to get their SpaceX suits unpacked and ready for their journey home. And since getting the hatches closed this morning, that Dragon hatch closer coming at 4:19 a.m. Central Time, the astronauts are now suited up and in their seats. They are standing by for undocking. We have the final go, no-go poll coming up in a few minutes where the SpaceX and NASA teams make their final call for Dragon to depart station. This is one of the many checkpoints in the return that continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn and have happened over the last several days, giving mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones and making sure everything lines up for Dragon's departure. So we're standing by for the final go, no-go, but right now everything continues to look good for an on-time departure. And with that, I will send it back to Kate and Gary in Hawthorne.
Separation is set for
SpaceX on the big loop. Final reconfigurations for undock are complete and nominal. NASA and SpaceX teams have both pulled go for the undock sequence start at 1100 UTC. Please confirm that your visors are down and crew are ready for undock and departure.
SpaceX Endeavour, visors are down, crew is ready to undock.
All right, so as we just heard moments ago, we got confirmation that Dragon completed its final configuration and that mission operators are go for the undocking procedure, so that's great.
So just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board, which is typically faster and easier this time around since the crew won't have the option to stop at waypoints like we see at when the vehicle arrives.
Once the undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of 5 departure burns, which are carefully choreographed maneuvers that will increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. From there, a phasing burn will place Dragon on a trajectory back to Earth.
Wrapping up its trip home, Dragon will go through deorbit, entry, and landing, which covers all operations after that final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, a deorbit burn, closure of the nose cone, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally, splashdown off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover the Crew-6 astronauts inside Dragon from the water.
So as we just heard moments ago, that mission operators have pulled go for undocking. So as you will hear throughout the webcast, both as we approach the station and depart, everything is very carefully choreographed. There's a series of checks to make sure that we are go to proceed to the next step. And in this case, that next step is undocking.
That's right. And that will actually initiate the go for undock right at 4 a.m. Pacific time. And we're waiting for that undocking sequence to begin. So once that happens, it'll take less than 5 minutes or so for the Dragon to physically separate from the International Space Station, which has been its home for 6 months.
The first step in the automatic undocking sequence is for the umbilicals to retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon systems to the space station. They transfer power, telemetry, and commands between the two vehicles throughout Dragon's stay. Once that's complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks and that will occur in 2 separate phases. All of that combined will take roughly 4.5 minutes. Then Dragon will be ready to depart from station and begin to move itself further and further away by using its thrusters.
That's right. Dragon's initial departure from the station is a little different from other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon executes 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco engines surrounding the base of the capsule, with the first breaking any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backing the spacecraft away. And we're expecting the call for the undocking sequence to begin in the next few minutes or so. All right, so before they depart the station, let's take a moment to get to know the crew that we're bringing home today. First is Captain Steve Bowen, who hails from Cohasset, Massachusetts, and is married with 3 children. He holds the title of the first U.S. Navy submarine officer to be selected as a mission specialist by NASA. Bowen is also a veteran of 3 previous NASA space flights, including space shuttle flights on STS-126, 132, and 133. During those missions, he and his crew expanded the living quarters of the International Space Station, delivered an integrated cargo carrier, and the Russian mini research module. With this mission, he will have logged an estimated 227 days in space over 4 flights, including 65 hours and 57 minutes in 10 spacewalks. Today, he's the commander of Crew-6.
Sitting next to Stephen is pilot Warren Woody Hoberg. The 37-year-old is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He studied aeronautics and astronautics from MIT before getting a doctorate in electrical engineering and computer science from University of California, Berkeley. During grad school, Hoberg worked as an EMT with the Yosemite Search and Rescue. Crew-6 has been Hoberg's first flight since NASA selected him to be an astronaut in 2017. He is also a commercial pilot with instrument, single-engine, and multi-engine ratings. As pilot for Crew-6, he is responsible for spacecraft systems and performance. Aboard the station, he served as an Expedition 68 and 69 flight engineer and is coming home with 186 days in space and 11 hours, 38 minutes of time outside the hatch on 2 spacewalks.
In the role of mission specialist is astronaut Sultan Al-Niyati. He was chosen by the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center of the United Arab Emirates to be a part of Expedition 68 and 69. The father of 5 spent most of his life in Al Ain and Abu Dhabi, but in 2020 traded that in for astronaut training in Houston at the NASA Johnson Space Center. For this has been his first trip to space, so he now also has 186 days in orbit. Additionally, he went on 1 spacewalk, totaling 7 hours and 1 minute.
It was also the first trip to space for the second mission specialist, Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. Andrei was selected as a cosmonaut back in 2012. He will monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic re-entry phase of flight. While on board station, he served as a flight engineer for Expedition 68 and 69 and will return to Earth with 186 days of time in space under his belt.
That's right, and they'll all be undocking here in just a few minutes. Before they actually undocked, they actually had played a game with the flight operations team on the ground, and just moments before we started this broadcast, they exchanged some words. Here's a replay of that moment.
Dragon, Houston, on the Big Loop.
Houston Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, we're still about 45 minutes from undock, but before we get busy, we just want to say, wow, can you believe it's already time to leave? We can't. It's been an amazing mission. You've birthed 2 Cygnuses, or Cygni, docked 2 cargo Dragons. You've executed a port relocate, facilitated a private astronaut mission, performed 3 U.S. EVAs and 5 Russian EVAs, copious amounts of critical science, as well as your fair share of maintenance, stowage, and rack swaps. And we didn't really want to mention it, but you also mastered us in chess a few times, too. So you're truly space kings. You've done an incredible job, and to say it's been a pleasure to support you guys during this mission would be an understatement. Let's send you guys home.
Houston Endeavor, thank you very much. It's been a real privilege and an honor to be up here for this expedition as it continues. And we're coming up on 23 years of continuous occupation of the International Space Station, which is absolutely amazing. It's just a real privilege to be a part of it. It has been an amazing mission. The Expedition 69 crew has been above and beyond, and I've had the privilege of watching it all happen. I really think this has been amazing. And thank you, Houston, and thank you, Mission Control, and everybody on the ground, the entire team from Scuba, Huntsville, Munich, Moscow, the entire team coming together and ensuring that our expedition was smooth and safely completed. It's really been an honor. Thank you.
So for those of you just tuning in, we are standing by for the command of the undocking sequence. Again, this is an autonomous sequence that Dragon performs once commanded to do so.
Undock sequence commanded.
And right on time. There's that call we were standing by for to basically command Dragon to begin the undocking sequence. With Dragon now getting ready to undock, let's head over to Leah in Mission Control at Johnson Space Center.
Thanks, Kate. And as you mentioned, and as we heard the core and
umbilical
crew
demate
confirm,
complete
the
and nominal.
undock has been... Undock has been commanded, and the umbilical, which provided power to Dragon from the International Space Station, has been detached as well. Now the undock command has been sent. However, we are standing by. This process takes a few minutes. This is a process of 2 sets of 6 hooks each, so 12 hooks in total that we'll need to retract. Those first set of hooks are in motion. We will be looking for a confirmation when that's complete before the second set begins retracting as well. We're expecting time of physical separation to be at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern Time. Quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the departure of Dragon Endeavour. About 3 more minutes until we see physical separation. Those first set of hooks continue to retract.
First set of hooks open and nominal.
Never copies.
The crew operations and resources engineer in Hawthorne, California at SpaceX Mission Control communicating with the team aboard Dragon Endeavour. Our Crew-6 astronauts coming home today, Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg of NASA, Sultan Al-Nayati of the United Arab Emirates, and Andrei Fedyayev of Roscosmos. The second set of 6 hooks continues to retract. After those hooks are fully open, we will see 2 short burns known as undock burn 1 and 2, both just a few seconds long, that will break the stiction or the attachment of Dragon to the International Space Station. Again, we're looking at that in about 1 minute. Second set of hooks continue to retract. Standing by for undocked burns 1 and 2.
All hooks open and nominal.
Copy, see the same.
And Dragon separation is confirmed.
At 6:05 a.m. Central Time, and after 184 days on the International Space Station, Dragon has departed the orbiting laboratory, traveling 256 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean.
Depart burn 0 complete.
We saw the 2 successful undocked burns, 1 and 2, again, both. Both of the undocked burns just a couple of seconds long, as well as confirmation that the depart burn is complete as well. And with the successful undocking, again, that coming at 6:05 a.m. Central Time, right on time, Dragon, Endeavour, and Crew-6 begin their journey back to Earth. We're still monitoring from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, but to give us perspective from the other side of the operations, I'll toss it back to Gary and Kate in Hawthorne.
All right, thank you, Leah, for taking us through that. Yeah, we had physical separation right on time, 4:05 a.m. Pacific time, 7:05 a.m. Eastern time. You can see we're at a nighttime view as the station and Dragon pass over the Pacific Ocean. So we're just seeing the through the middle window there inside the lit cabin inside the Dragon, as well as the navigation lights, starboard being green and port being red, as Dragon increases its separation distance from the International Space Station, about 45 meters, and going back. Depart 0 after the 2 undocking burns to physically separate and increase the distance from the docking ring. Depart 0 will send Dragon outside the keep out sphere. Keep out sphere has its own set of rules, is a line about 200 meters away from the International Space Station, so we'll get right outside of that, and we'll wait towards depart burn 1. Depart burn 1 will send Dragon outside the approach ellipsoid. You can see the graphic here. Dragon's trajectory will take it zenith. It'll take it above the International Space Station, and from there it will slow down until it executes depart burn 2, which allows the Dragon to decrease its altitude and get to a trajectory about 10 kilometers below the International Space Station in a co-elliptic orbit. For this particular trajectory to meet up with the landing location, the prime location of Jacksonville, Florida, the trajectory allows for 5 departure burns. So we'll see that executed over the next 17 hours until splashdown. We do have a correction to that splashdown time. We're aiming for 12:17 a.m. Eastern Time, which is 9:17 p.m. Pacific Time. And that's again off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Continuing to increase separation distance, we're at about 78 meters from the International Space Station.
I love this view that we have. It might be a little confusing if you're just looking at it wondering what all the dots are. The lights that we see actually moving on screen is Dragon itself. The red and green represent the port and the starboard side. That white light in the center is actually an interior light shining through the forward hatch of the capsule. So if we would have been able to perform a fly-around maneuver, that is actually one of the windows that they would have been using to take photos.
That's right, and with the nighttime views, you can actually see some of the pixels that have they're actually dead pixels. They sort of look like very colorful, Christmassy light stars, but it's actually dead pixels on the camera that have been hit by some radiation in space. And this is pretty normal for some of the cameras that we see in space. There's actually programs within the camera that allow there's software within it that allow us to fix some of the imperfections of those pixels. But those are not stars. Those are pixels of the camera.
So for those of you that have recently joined the webcast, the Crew-6 crew are there inside Dragon that we see on screen. They are in their spacesuits. They are in their seats. It's been a long morning stepping through all the checks in preparation for the event that we just had, which was Dragon separation. We also executed the first of our 5 departure burns, and we're now standing by for departure burn 1. We're expecting that around 4:10, which is right now, a.m. Pacific. So there's this graphic that we have to kind of give you an idea of the different areas that we're looking at when we're talking about the International Space Station, what it takes to depart. This is an awesome view. You can actually see lights from those Draco thrusters as they fire.
That's depart burn 1. It's about a 21-second burn, and you can see it executing right now. Great to have this nighttime shot to actually see those Draco thruster firings.
Absolutely.
We hear depart burn 1 is complete and nominal. That's a good depart burn 1. Again, that sends a trajectory of Dragon outside the keep out sphere and approach ellipsoid. We'll continue our coverage until Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, which will end joint operations between the Dragon and Dragon teams here in Hawthorne and the International Space Station Flight Control teams in Houston.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Depart burn 1 is complete and nominal, and with that you are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012, and I'll go ahead and take the cameras external. And just a reminder that ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Our coffee is moving into suit balancing, spacing for the cameras, and thank you, ISS. It's been an amazing 6 months. It's Crew-7, and 69 for you. Continue Expedition 69 into the 70. Enjoy your visit, and we'll talk to you back on Earth.
And Dragon Station, we copy. We're going to miss you guys, but it's good to see you go and get back to your families. Great job on the mission. Godspeed, and we'll see you splashing down safely here in about 17 hours. Great job.
All right, to recap some of the exchange there, that was from inside the Dragon, Commander Steve Bowen sending some congratulatory words for a successful separation and exit of the keep out sphere. Frank Rubio from inside the station saying farewell. On the big loop, this is an audio configuration that allows both teams on the ground, the teams in Houston as well as Hawthorne, and the 2 spacecraft in orbit, the Dragon and the International Space Station, all to talk on one communication loop. Saying farewell to their crew. They're now outside the keep out sphere, and the next step is the approach ellipsoid. They just got the cue to doff their suits because that next burn, depart burn 2, is not going to happen for another 50 minutes.
Gary, you mentioned the keep out sphere. For those that might be unfamiliar with approaching or departing the International Space Station, it is an imaginary sphere. Obviously nothing physical out there, but it's, as you can see there on your screen, as the name indicates, that is the sphere that you have to have, there's a check to enter the keep out sphere as you approach the International Space Station. It's basically this imaginary sphere about 200 meters all around the International Space Station, and as Gary just said, we are now out of it.
That's right, and that next sphere outside of that is the approach ellipsoid. Each of them has sort of a set of its own rules, the keep out sphere and then the approach ellipsoid. That approach ellipsoid is 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. And once the spacecraft is outside of that imaginary line, it has to be on what's called a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. So that means the spacecraft wouldn't cross into the approach ellipsoid and risk any recontact with the International Space Station for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering.
So again, continuing to track Dragon on its departure from the International Space Station. We had separation at 4:05 a.m. Eastern Time, exactly right on time.
And again, we'll continue our coverage through the spacecraft's exit of the approach ellipsoid. We're still in an orbital nighttime.
SpaceX Endeavour, comm check from the cabin lights.
And again,
we have you loud and clear as well.
The big loop configuration allows, again, the two spacecraft in orbit, the Dragon that you see from this screen from one of the cameras on board the International Space Station. It's hard to see because we are in an orbital nighttime, so you can just see the navigation lights as well as the lights from the interior of the cabin through the center window there with the open nose cone. But everyone is talking, and that's part of the configuration once we're inside these joint operations spheres. We've been talking about the keep-out sphere, the approach ellipsoid. That big loop will be deconfigured shortly after exiting the approach ellipsoid, and the Dragon crew will just be operating on what's called Dragon to Ground. It's a communication link between the inside the Dragon capsule and the teams here in Mission Control in Hawthorne.
As we heard before, the crew got the okay to doff or take off their suits. This allows them to be a little bit more comfortable in their seats, and as we go through the next phases, as you also heard on comms, it's about a 17-hour trip from undock to splashdown. So they don't need to wear their suits the whole time, and so right now we are tracking Dragon here on this shot, and the crew is doffing their suits and standing by for the next phase. Once again, we are standing by to exit the approach ellipsoid, which, as Gary mentioned, another imaginary shape out there by the ISS, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. And big difference between it and the keep-out sphere is that the approach ellipsoid, the vehicles outside it have to be on a 24-hour safe free trajectory, meaning that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering capability. So we can see those dots from Dragon, those exterior lights, getting further and further away. We were able to see the Draco engines firing as they were performing departure burn number 1.
And again, those departure burns 0 and 1 allow the spacecraft to exit those two spheres. Kate and I have been talking about the keep-out sphere and approach ellipsoid. We're hearing from the teams, the flight control teams that are monitoring Dragon's progress, that the spacecraft has exited the approach ellipsoid. So again, the crew has doffed their suits. It allows a little bit more comfort as they begin their journey, which will take more than 17 hours from the time of undocking to the time they actually touch down in the Atlantic coast. It'll allow them time to eat, to sleep, to be comfortable, and enjoy the ride. So
take their last looks at planet Earth from their vantage point.
That's right, exactly.
Well, now that NASA astronauts Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg, Emirati astronaut Sultan Al-Nayati, and Roscosmos astronaut Andrei Fedyaev have departed the International Space Station, as you can see with that great half-lit shot there on your screen. It will take them about 17 hours until they're back on Earth. The crew is currently doffing their spacesuits to settle in for the flight home. And today, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida, as Gary just said, at 9:17 p.m. Pacific on September 3rd, or 12:17 a.m. Eastern, September 4th. And that will be followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of the SpaceX recovery vessels. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return to Earth for Dragon and our Crew-6 astronauts.
And though our coverage here in Hawthorne is wrapping up for tonight, we will turn it over to the NASA team in Houston to take us through the next phases of the Crew-6 mission. Our friends at the Johnson Space Center will provide continuous live audio-only coverage along Crew-6's journey home until we rejoin approximately an hour prior to splashdown. You can find the audio-only link by visiting nasa.gov/live and clicking the mission audio link, or by searching NASA's Mission Audio Live feed on YouTube.
Meanwhile, we will rejoin for live visual coverage starting roughly 1 hour prior to splashdown. As always, you can find mission updates on X at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you real soon.